hope you can hear the sound of my voice. Tonight, we honor a monster in the entertainment industries.
March 14, 2011 started like any normal day for Gilbert Gottfried. He was the voice of Aflac's Duck, making millions for the company.
A guy walks into a bar. Joan Rivers is the bartender.
Then his phone rang. The call lasted less than 5 minutes. When it ended, his 11-year career was over. 3 days earlier, he had tweeted something about Japan's earthquake disaster. The jokes were so cruel that Aflac fired him immediately.
What eventually happened, they fired me.
They didn't just replace him quietly. They held a nationwide search with 12,000 applicants to erase him completely. What Gilbert typed became the first major example of social media destroying a celebrity's career instantly. Gilbert Gottfried was born on February 28, 1955, in Coney Island in a tight little apartment above his father Max's hardware store. Their place felt crowded all the time because it sat right over the shop and because Brooklyn never rested. Trains shook the windows. Street vendors shouted below. Neighbors argued through thin walls. His mother Lillian tried to keep the home steady, while Max worked long days downstairs. Gilbert grew up in that noise and weight, and somehow turned it into fuel. By the time he was 10, he was already entertaining relatives with impressions. He copied Ronald Reagan's voice and pulled faces so exaggerated they shocked adults, but made his sisters, Karen and Arlene, burst out laughing. That early push and pull of family life, mixed with the raw energy of the neighborhood, shaped the strange little spark that later became his stage persona. His voice, the one people would never forget, did not come naturally at all. In early videos from 1980, during his Saturday Night Live days, he spoke in a soft, smooth tone, almost gentle. But soon he began twisting it into that sharp, grating sound that could slice through any room. Childhood allergies played a part, yet the real reason was survival. New York's comedy scene was loud and hungry, and he needed a way to stand out. His parents doubted comedy would lead anywhere, but his sisters pushed him to try open mics. So he crafted a voice that nobody could ignore. Audiences found it abrasive, sometimes unbearable, yet impossible to forget. And that was exactly what he wanted. At 15, he stepped into the bitter end for his first open mic. It was a hootenanny night in the mid-1970s, and the room felt thick with cigarette smoke and nerves. His sisters sat in the crowd and watched him throw impressions of Boris Karloff and Humphrey Bogart into a handful of rough jokes about daily life. Some people laughed too hard, others got up and walked out. That mix became familiar. Still, he kept showing up. The more he returned, the more the New York circuit learned his name. By the time he joined Saturday Night Live in 1980, he had already carved out a style made of shock, sharp timing, and fearless delivery. Gilbert never shied away from taboo subjects. Part of that came from sneaking into Manhattan clubs as a teenager to watch Lenny Bruce. Bruce tore apart every rule on stage, and Gilbert soaked it in. He saw what it looked like to push against the edges of free speech, and he carried that influence into his own early work. He cracked jokes about religion. He poked at family dysfunction. He knew it might offend people, but he also knew it opened a door, and he liked walking through doors other comics avoided. That choice made him loved in some circles and completely rejected in others. Yet it built the foundation for the legend he later became. Around 1970, he started drifting between places like the Comic Strip and Catch a Rising Star. These clubs had late nights full of smoke, drunks, and unforgiving crowds. Gilbert kept coming back, again and again, night after night. Comics started calling him a comedian's comedian because he talked about things they understood too well. Awkward dates, terrible subway rides, strange New York moments. He was not an overnight star, and he knew it, but his raspy voice and strange delivery stood out among hundreds of hopefuls. By 1975, Producers for Saturday Night Live began to notice him. That momentum helped push him closer to the stage that would change everything. In 1975, when he was 20, he finally got his first paid gig in a small Brooklyn club. He talked about his Jewish upbringing and joked about his family eating pork. That topic alone stirred loud complaints, but he kept going. Jerry Seinfeld, who was also rising in the scene at the time, admired how Gilbert refused to hold back. The set caused a stir, but it also made bookers remember him. It showed everyone that this young guy would not soften his punches for anyone. That one night helped shape the path he walked for the rest of his life. By 1977, he was grinding through Hell's Kitchen, performing unpaid sets and working day shifts at the hardware store to keep himself afloat. Those clubs were rough, and the audiences were unpredictable. To stand out, he started adding sudden screams, wild impressions, and bits where he placed celebrities in embarrassing situations. Not every crowd liked it, but other comedians noticed. He kept studying what made people laugh and what made them uncomfortable. He lived in that thin space where jokes could crumble or explode. Those nights in Hell's Kitchen forced him to sharpen every part of his act. Then came 1978 and the improv comedy contest. He walked on stage and talked about family vacations, but he twisted the stories in a way nobody expected. He improvised scenes of siblings fighting, and at one point described a brother biting another brother's ear during a trip. People gasped, then laughed, then clapped. The judges were stunned, but they loved it. Gilbert won the contest and finally had a real break. From that night on, he was no longer just the strange kid from Brooklyn. He became a rising star in New York's comedy world. But the road forward was not clean. He had moments where he went too far and faced the consequences. One night, he tried mocking Holocaust survivors' accents, and the audience turned on him. They booed him off stage. That backlash forced him to adjust. By 1979, he started adding intense visual tics to his act. He widened his eyes until they looked ready to pop. He stood stiff. He let silence stretch until people shifted in their seats. These choices made his punchlines land harder. It made everything feel more uncomfortable and more memorable. Even failures pushed him toward something new. Then came his leap to Saturday Night Live in 1980. He was 25, and the show was going through massive changes under producer Jean Doumanian. His first big moment was a Jimmy Carter impression. He used his screechy voice to mock Carter's drawl while ranting about inflation. He shouted a line about it being higher than a kite, and it caught viewers off guard. Ratings were low that season, and the show was in chaos, but Gilbert managed to stand out. He only stayed for 12 episodes, yet those sketches planted his name in late-night comedy forever. One of his fan favorites from that season was the Baron von Raschke sketch. He used a thick German accent to parody the real wrestler and tossed out absurd threats like, "I will schnitzel your mudder." It was violent, silly, and strange, and the audience loved it. That sketch showed how far he could take a parody and how much he committed to every moment. He pushed every line into a place that felt dangerous, but still funny. But then came the airline food vomit sketch in 1981. It was a cold open, and he went completely off script, describing vomit in such graphic detail that network censors panicked. Producers rushed to cut the worst parts. That moment helped push him out of SNL and became part of his legend. People talked about how he shocked even NBC, which was used to wild behavior. That sketch showed he was willing to risk everything for a joke. In 1982, he appeared on The Tonight Show and delivered a routine about celebrity scandals. He aimed jokes at Elizabeth Taylor and her many marriages. He used the phrase, "divorce orgies," and the crowd exploded with laughter. But backstage, producers warned him he might offend sponsors. Gilbert walked a thin line, and he liked it. His fearlessness made him polarizing and unforgettable. It also kept pushing him into bigger opportunities. By 1983, he was doing hyperactive voiceover spots for a New York deli chain. He yelled about pastrami specials and tossed in jokes about sausage parties. Some people complained. Some people loved it. But everyone noticed it. Even advertising could not tame him. He brought the same wild energy into those commercials that he brought on stage. That willingness to test limits kept him different from everyone else. Gilbert Gottfried stepped into movies in 1984 with Beverly Hills Cop, and the moment he opened his mouth as Ira, the wild little accountant, people leaned in. He tossed out lines like, "I am not a crook. I am just bad with numbers," and the way he screeched them made the whole scene tilt toward him. It was supposed to be a small role, yet it ended up shaping how people saw him. He could take a calm moment and twist it until everyone was laughing or confused or both. That film pushed him into Hollywood in a real way and showed that his voice, his timing, and his chaos were not things anyone else could copy. Then came 1985, and he stepped onto HBO with a stand-up special that felt more like a chaotic dinner table brawl than a comedy set. He started with a simple story about matzo balls and somehow turned it into a shouting match with choking sounds and imaginary food flying everywhere. Viewers did not know whether to laugh or look away, and that reaction became the point. Critics said he was fearless, and people kept talking about that special for years because it proved he could take a normal moment and drag it into madness while still keeping everyone hooked. In 1986, he did The Hero, and that role stirred up even more noise. He played a sleazy agent with a monologue so explicit about Hollywood casting couches that the studio cut pieces out before the release. Even with the edits, people heard enough to know he was pushing boundaries again. Comics whispered about it. Fans hunted for the original scene, and his name kept moving forward because controversy tended to follow him like a shadow he enjoyed. By 1987, he was touring with Dirty Jokes Unlimited, packing places like the Beacon Theater and causing walkouts in the same breath. His routines jumped from bodily functions to STDs, to things most comics refused to touch. One night, he told a joke about STDs that was so graphic, half a row stood up and left. But the rest of the crowd stayed and roared. He lived for that kind of reaction. His shows felt dangerous, unpredictable, and alive. And people kept showing up because they never knew what he would say next. In 1988, he landed on Late Night with David Letterman. And suddenly, he was in a pet store pretending to voice animals. A parrot yelling insults at customers. A guinea pig complaining about its cage. Each moment felt loose and improvised, like he was discovering the bit while performing it. Clips spread around the country through copied VHS tapes because there was no internet yet, only word of mouth. That appearance showed people he could be funny anywhere. Even in a room filled with animals that did not care, he was on television. Then the story shifted in 1992. Gilbert walked into an audition at Disney for Aladdin, and something strange happened. He picked up the script for Iago and started improvising lines about losing feathers instead of losing heads. And the entire room froze for a second.
Boy, Jafar's gonna be happy to see you.
Nobody planned for Iago to sound like that, but Gilbert's voice twisted the character instantly. Disney took his audition tape, animated a rough sketch of Iago walking around, and synced the voice with it. They knew right then that this bird needed to be built around him, not the other way around. Joe Pesci and Danny DeVito auditioned too, but Gilbert was the one who made the room shake. When the recording session started, he only pushed harder. For the betrayal scene, he recorded more than 100 takes. Every time he tried a version, he added a new joke or a strange twist. In one take, he called Agrabah a dump with flies everywhere, and the animators laughed so much they slid the line into the final film. Directors kept asking him to try again, not because he was wrong, but because they wanted to see what else he might invent. That chaos gave Iago the mix of anger and comedy that nobody could forget. In 1994, for The Return of Jafar, he was even louder. During the fight scenes, he hit screams so sharp that his headphones broke more than once. He tossed in jokes that were never written, like teasing the genie about living in a lamp. Disney kept many of them because they made Iago feel wild and close to breaking.
Okay, you marry the princess, all right?
That energy became a big part of why the sequel felt so loose and unpredictable. When Aladdin and the King of Thieves came in 1996, he pushed again. In the wedding crash scene, he delivered lines about Kasim's family secrets that were so graphic, the censors almost cut the whole section. He toned pieces down, but the final version still felt edgy for a family film. Fans loved it because he was the only Disney sidekick who sounded ready to expose everything with a grin. Before all that, in 1990, he had voiced Junior Devil in Problem Child. That role was small, but it left a mark. He talked about eternal damnation and heavenly contracts like a salesman trying to close a deal, and kids had no idea what to make of it. The mix of innocence and wicked humor became something fans quoted for years, calling it one of his first real steps into subversive comedy. His voice kept traveling into stranger places as the years moved on. From 1996 to 2000, he voiced Digit LeBoyd in Cyber Chase, a robot bird teaching math with jokes that sometimes shocked parents but helped kids remember things they usually forgot. One teacher said her students could recall the value of pi because of a line he delivered comparing it to his ex-wife. He made numbers sound dangerous and funny at the same time, and that unexpected mix helped the show stay alive. In 1997, he stepped into Superman as Mr. Mxyzptlk, a small imp with a huge voice. He turned Lois Lane into a frog in one scene, twisted time and space in another, and kept Superman guessing with every appearance. Fans loved him because he brought absurdity into a show usually filled with straight hero drama. His line, "You schmoes think you can go 15 rounds with the MXY," became something people repeated at conventions for years. In 2000, he jumped into Clerks as a whole lineup of celebrity parodies. Patrick Swayze talking about pottery until he almost exploded. Jerry Seinfeld ranting in a pitch that felt like it could shatter glass. Gilbert pushed the characters so far that even adult viewers felt confused about whether they should laugh or look around the room to see if someone else was shocked too. Those episodes became known for their wild edge and his screechy unpredictability. Then, in 2003, he became a demonic Santa Claus in the grim adventures of Billy and Mandy. He shouted lines like, "I will swallow your soul," and kids sat in front of their televisions trying to understand why Santa suddenly sounded like a monster. Some regions cut the scene, some parents complained, but the episode grew into a cult favorite. People remembered it because it took something familiar and twisted it with his voice until it felt completely new. By 2012, he was Krang Subprime in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, an alien brain in a robot body obsessed with pizza and world domination. He threatened the world with lines that sounded silly and dangerous at the same time, which was exactly what the series needed. Kids quoted him, fans laughed at him, and the creators later said they chose him because there was no way anyone else could give that character the same kind of unforgettable menace. On September 15, 1991, the Emmy stage felt bright and safe until Gilbert Gottfried walked out with a grin that hinted he was about to light a match in a room full of fireworks. He opened the show with jokes about masturbation and tied them straight to Paul Rubens's arrest in Sarasota, Florida, earlier that year. The room froze for a second, then murmurs rolled through it like a quiet storm growing louder. He said that if masturbation was a crime, he should be on death row. And that line went out live to the East Coast before anyone could stop it. By the time the West Coast broadcast arrived, the network had already cut the jokes, and Fox released a formal apology, calling the remarks irresponsible and insulting. Inside the industry, the reaction was immediate. He was blacklisted from the Emmys right away. No more invites came after that night, not even once. And the whole moment settled into Hollywood memory as one of the clearest examples of a comedian crossing a line in the wrong room at the wrong time. 10 years later, the world was heavy with grief after the 9/11 attacks. And on September 29, 2001, the Friars Club roast for Hugh Hefner barely felt like a place for laughter. Still, Gottfried stepped up with a 9/11 joke that fell flat so fast the silence felt painful. He sensed it, paused, and then made a sharp turn into The Aristocrats. 5 minutes of a joke so graphic and so wild that even at a roast people had to catch their breath. Incest, chaos, shock, every taboo stacked on top of another. At first the room stayed quiet. Slowly, it broke open and turned into full applause. That moment traveled far. It became a centerpiece in the 2005 documentary The Aristocrats. And Penn Jillette and Paul Provenza both called it one of the most powerful comedic recoveries they had ever seen. Gottfried showed he could walk straight into the darkest place and somehow come out with people cheering. But in 2006, things took another turn that left a mark on him. He appeared on The Howard Stern Show and made a joke about 7-year-old Bindi Irwin right after Steve Irwin's death. The remark was so inappropriate, the producers cut his mic on the spot. They deleted the segment before the show aired. News outlets picked it up anyway, and soon he faced public backlash so strong that some radio stations stopped booking him altogether. Comedians whispered about it behind the scenes. It became a quiet warning about trying to make jokes involving the children of public figures, especially after a tragedy. Then came 2008. Gottfried toured with material that leaned into celebrity deaths and tragic ends. Heath Ledger had died that year, and Gottfried made jokes about the overdose, calling Ledger's Oscar a prize for the best nap. People gasped, and some even threatened lawsuits. Ledger's estate looked into taking action, but never filed. Despite the shock, the jokes spread far. Fans argued about them, critics wrote about them, and Gottfried said again that comedy and tragedy were roommates. He believed that humor grew out of pain. He leaned into that belief, even when it burned him. By 2010, he began turning the jokes inward. At comedy festivals, he talked about aging and mocked his own voice by calling it a dying cat in a blender. Some audiences walked out. Others laughed so hard they cried. The routine became one of his trademarks that year. His ability to shock with honesty drew attention even from people who did not enjoy his earlier material. He stayed raw and unfiltered, and that quality shaped a new chapter in his career. His career shifted again in 2000, when Aflac hired him to voice their duck mascot. The first ad aired just before the Super Bowl, and the company had spent $1 million to launch it. Gottfried's unique quack became so recognizable that Aflac's brand awareness jumped from under 10% to nearly 90% within 3 years.
Who needs 5 words? Aflac!
He made around $400,000 a year for the role. The timing of the launch pushed sales upward so quickly that Aflac doubled its United States revenue. Advertisers studied that campaign for years. Even rival insurers tried to copy the formula with their own animal mascots. By 2003, the duck had its own personality. Gottfried ad-libbed lines that pushed the character to the edge. Some ads even placed the duck in scenes with fires or car crashes where he shouted things like Aflac or flambe. Sales jumped 15% that year. The campaign controlled nearly every conversation about insurance marketing. People remembered the duck, even if they did not remember the company. Between 2005 and 2007, the Duck entered a new phase. Aflac created celebrity parody ads, where the Duck pretended to be Oprah during lavish shopping scenes. The jokes were sharp and chaotic, and the production quality felt like a Hollywood shoot. These ads won Clio Awards and boosted Aflac's cultural reach. Gottfried's voice carried all of it. The Duck had become an icon because he made it unpredictable. In 2008, the ads leaned into Las Vegas energy with gambling jokes and risky innuendo.
About it at work.
Really? And what's it called?
Aflac!
The Duck talked about bad bets and accident coverage like it was part of a casino trick. Some people thought the humor went too far, but the buzz kept growing. The Duck stayed relevant because Gottfried kept pushing boundaries. By 2010, he had voiced more than 50 Aflac commercials and even earned bonuses when ads went viral. One skit showed the Duck battling an alligator with loud crunches and dramatic sound effects. It became a viral hit and added to Gottfried's earnings. The partnership lasted until 2011 and stood as the most profitable role of his life. Everything changed on March 11, 2011. Japan suffered a massive earthquake and tsunami that killed nearly 20,000 people. While the world watched in horror, Gottfried tweeted jokes to his 1.5 million followers. One said Japan was so advanced, the beach came to them. Another said breakups were easy because another partner would float by. The jokes spread quickly and people reacted with shock and anger. Gottfried later said humor was how he coped with tragedy, but that explanation came too late. On March 14th, Aflac fired him. They released a statement saying his remarks did not reflect the company's values. It mattered even more because 75% of Aflac's business came from Japan. They replaced him through a nationwide casting call with more than 12,000 applicants. They also donated the equivalent of about $1.2 million to relief efforts. Gottfried apologized on Twitter and said he meant no disrespect, but the damage was severe. His firing became one of the first major examples of a celebrity losing a job over social media. Still, he kept moving. Between 2012 and 2020, he built a huge following with Gilbert Gottfried's amazing Colossal podcast. He and Frank Santopadre recorded more than 798 episodes full of wild stories, old Hollywood secrets, and interviews with legends. One unforgettable episode talked about Robin Williams improvising over 100 jokes in each genie scene during Aladdin. Fans loved the show. It felt like sitting with someone who had seen everything and wanted to tell you every wild detail. In 2015, he returned as Iago in the Aladdin stage adaptation in New York. He made jokes about his Aflac firing, saying, "Even ducks fire me." The audience loved it. He turned embarrassment into comedy and made people feel like he was letting them in on the joke. His run lasted 20 performances, and critics praised him for his honesty and humor. Starting in 2018, he faced serious health problems. He developed recurrent ventricular tachycardia caused by type 2 myotonic dystrophy, a rare disorder that affects 1 in 8,000 people. Even then, he kept performing. In 2020, he joked that his heart was quacking out. He hid pain behind humor, and people admired that strength. On April 12, 2022, at 2:35 in the afternoon in Manhattan, Gilbert Gottfried died at age 67. The tributes poured in. Jerry Seinfeld, Eddie Murphy, and many others shared stories about his unmatched shock value and his strange blend of offense and affection. His family said he left behind his wife Dara, their children Lily and Max, and his sister Karen. Friends filled his funeral in Westchester County and remembered him not just as a provocateur, but as someone loyal and unexpectedly gentle.